The only way that we could get the Alliance to do anything was through the media. It was only through shaming them by putting the truth out there.
A friend of mine had a copy of Christianity Today, which is a publication from a Christian organization. And he asked me, had I seen this article? And it was a brief article about the Christian and Missionary Alliance and the complaints that were being made about their treatment of children at Mamou in the Guinea. And the first question we had, of course, was, did that occur during the time that our children were there? And of course, it turns out that it did, because it actually took place over a few decades of time, and part of which our children were there.
So it was kind of startling when they heard about how bad this place had been and called us up and said, hey, we want to talk to you about this, and Howie and I went over there, and it was kind of like we didn't know it was this bad.
And they looked at us and said, how is it that you didn't know? And so all of a sudden they were little boys again. And most little kids think their parents know everything, you know.
There was never any processing like this. They never asked about Mamou. They never wanted to know what that experience was like for Keith and me. So again, I feel that at some level they knew what had happened and couldn't come to grips with it, and didn't want to admit what they had done to us and enabled other people to do to us.
We had no idea what was happening at the school. We thought it was a normal boarding school where the children were being well treated. We got letters from the teachers, we got letters from the principal, and they would tell us how good our children were and how obedient they were and how happy they were. And so we believed it.
The letters, we wrote them every week. We learned very quickly that we had to write only good things, because if we wrote anything negative, we were punished and we had to rewrite the letter. And at the beginning, I would just change a comma or a period and I'd redo it. And I'd spent the entire day rewriting the same letter. So eventually you say enough of this and you write good things and you mail them home.
Why were we slow in responding to this? I think there are several reasons. I think it could be some fear. It could be some doubt. It could be some self-righteousness. It could be some shame. All of these things can result in an unwillingness to really face the truth.
I ended up getting a phone call from one of the board members of the Christian Missionary Alliance who says, we have now decided to take this out of the hands of the staff at headquarters, and instead of it being handled by the Division of Overseas Ministries, they have mishandled it to date. It will now be taken up directly by the Board of Managers.
And so we invited those of the Mamou Steering Committee to actually help us in nominating people for that independent commission of inquiry. It was made up of 5 high-level professional people with backgrounds in dealing with abuse, preventing abuse, helping people who have been abused move toward healing and wholeness again.
There were some alumni who let us know in quite strong terms that they didn't want any of this to be happening. They didn't want us to be talking about Mamou. They wanted us to let sleeping dogs lie, as they would put it, and so on. And then there were other people who waffled. Sometimes they would want this to go forward, and then sometimes they would want to put a lid on it. And then there was another group that seemed pretty steadfast about wanting to report what had happened and to be a part of that process. But we were never quite sure how many, and we would count and we would say, okay, well, there's this and this person, yeah, but the last we heard he was waffling, so maybe not. And we just wanted 15 to 20 people, and we figured that then we would be vindicated. There were 80 people that reported to the ICI.
So the ICI report just opened up this panoramic view of abuse at Mamou that shows that it wasn't just a few bad individuals or a few individuals with psychological problems who occasionally flew off the handle or lost control and did some bad things. It was a consistent, systemic problem from at least from the 50s, probably before, on through the 70s.
A culmination of a lot of what we did as a steering committee and that the Independent Commission of Inquiry brought about was for the Christian Missionary Alliance to hold a retreat in Atlanta for victims of Mamou, or people who had attended Mamou.
This event took place at Simpsonwood, a retreat center outside of Atlanta, Georgia. A total of 80 Mamou alumni attended, together with 50 parents and spouses, and 20 facilitators and denominational leaders. There seemed to be an almost unanimous consensus that the retreat was very helpful. For many, it was another positive step forward in their healing process. For others, it was just a beginning.
Some of the people who had been field directors and that kind of thing in Africa, who also were missionary kids, which is why they were at the retreat, but from high-profile Christian and Missionary Alliance families. Several of them came up to my dad, and one man in particular said, Mr. Dar, we didn't understand at first what your children were doing, but you need to be proud of them. And it's been good to stick with it, if you will, to see that the hard times and the emotional times and the heart-wrenching times have made a difference, at least a start of a difference.
We are sincerely grieved that because of our failure, a substantial number of students were subjected to emotional, physical, sexual, and even spiritual abuse. We feel a deep sense of sorrow because of the pain and hurt which many Mamou alumni experienced during their time at the school and for many years thereafter.
I felt that Peter Nanfelt, quite frankly, is a good politician, expressed remorse and regret, but quite frankly, I did not find his apology very satisfying. And I guess maybe it's because of the knowledge of the fact that this man, since 1987, right up to the date of the retreat, really had done as much as possible to stonewall and to not have all of this stuff come out into the open. And so, apology accepted, but how I felt about it is kind of ho-hum.